Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing incredibly well, and I hope you're going to treat yourself, spoil yourself, because you deserve to. Get yourself that sparkling drink or a very special something to eat, and if it's something that is very special to you, let me know about it, because I do love hearing from you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, nothing says regret more than waking up in a mediocre rent-by-the-week motel room, with its stale air, shabby chipboard cupboards that are dangling precariously on their hinges, that hint of the atrocious smell of fish mothballs that is exceedingly pronounced when you open the door. If that isn't bad enough, there's the commonplace middle-of-the-road pedestrian furnishings, devoid of any wholesome homeliness, without even the slightest suggestion of style. Then there are the tacky, tasteless curtains that dangle across the window, like dingy beige rags that could well do with a wash, for the smell that they engender is like that of an ashtray. There's a badly framed picture on the wall of a bland, insipid, uninspiring landscape, a crappy television that's always going on the blink with static, a long, thin, poky bed with a mattress that's so hard and unyielding you feel like you're sleeping on concrete. Then there's the hostile grey carpet. Let's not talk about that carpet. It's impregnated with filth. It smells as if many of the previous occupants smoked a plethora of cigarettes here. So the cheap spongy fabric has soaked up all that smoke with an unquenchable ravenous thirst. I even hired a portable, do-it-yourself vacuum-type carpet cleaner to eliminate the smell. I figured it was worth the money. I've been burning scented candles non-stop, but the pervasive, unpleasant, smoky smell it harbours will simply not abate, reminding me incessantly that I'm far from home. For there is nothing even remotely warm, inviting or hospitable about this cold, uncompanionable, disagreeable place that embodies the word nondescript to a T. I'd do absolutely anything to be able to return home, to sink cosily into our comfy, sumptuous sofas in the pleasing living room, with an ice-cold beer in my hands, watching the football on TV. But that's not going to happen in a hurry. When my wife Alison asked me to move out of the house, I thought it would be just for a few nights. She needed some time and space to cool down after our latest contentious fight. I mean, we'd been together for over 20 years, for goodness sake. Like any married couple, we've always had our ups and downs, but we pulled through the challenges that have arisen during the course of our marriage. I'd falsely assumed our relationship could regain its former buoyancy, like a deflated beach ball that had been pumped up again and is good to go. I thought we would bounce back, get through almost anything, rise above the tempestuous storms in life, conquer the earthquakes of anger, ride over the undulating, crashing waves of disenchantment. But not so. We were us, after all. I mean, we could get through anything, could we not? But I couldn't have been more wrong. As any fleeting hope that the dwindling flames of our love could be miraculously revived, repaired, rekindled, or regenerated was quite literally a non-starter. This time things were very different. I realised this when my wife did not invite me back home, which meant that things on the horizon of my life did not bode well for my future. Ostensibly, my wife was failing to even answer my phone calls. She was avoiding me like the plague. Clearly, she didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. I'm shaving my 2-day-old stubble that has gathered around my chin in sharp little prickles. I'm using a dollar store razor and some cheap foaming aftershave that is quite literally guaranteed to make me break out into a nasty red rash. I'm staring at my reflection in front of a filmy, dingy bathroom mirror. I am mortified by what I'm seeing. My reflection is not pretty. I've certainly seen better days before, looked a lot more agreeable than I do now. Is this really me? My hair's been washed in a cheap shampoo. It's all fly-away and unkempt looking. My eyes are lined by telltale black rings that suggest that sleep has eluded me. And as for my stubble, I look exactly like a bank robber or an unpleasant, thuggish-looking character that you would do well to avoid if he fortuitously crossed your path. I almost cut myself with the razor, wondering if I will return home ever again. Or is this really it? Over the last couple of years, my wife has been dropping the divorce bombs far too regularly, like fireworks on the 4th of July. At first, I dismissed those subtle hints as her way of winding me up. But now I've come to the stunning, stark conjecture that my wife hasn't been happy with me for a very long time. I should have seen the warning signs, sensed the rather tense, awkward atmosphere, picked up the negative vibes from her. But sometimes you don't want to see what's staring you blindly in the face like a red flag. It's a little like walking into a messy kitchen. You pretend you don't see the huge pile of washing up that needs doing. You don't want to be reminded of the ugly truth. Those dishes clearly need your attention, but it's best to ignore them. Pretend the mess isn't there, and maybe, just maybe it'll go away. I think that's what I've been doing in my marriage for far too long. Ignoring the mess. Pretending it doesn't exist, believing if I willfully ignore it for long enough, the problem will just go away. But much like the dirty dishes in the kitchen, it's got significantly worse over time. The dishes pile up so considerably. You cannot ignore the chaos anymore. It's reached the point of no return. It needs to be addressed, rather like the proverbial pink elephant in the room that's crying out for your immediate attention. You can't blindly ignore it. It's staring you in the face. I can't remember the last time my wife has smiled or laughed at one of my less than imaginative jokes, or even taken the time to pretend to find them funny. Of course, I know I'm entirely to blame. I can't pass this on my wife. I've always got to win every single argument, persuading my wife to my way of thinking. I know she only ever concedes to appease me, because she wants to prevent a blazing row from igniting. More recently, I've noticed Alison flinching when I've touched her, pulling away from me. These days she looks tired, fatigued. Every time I return to bed she's fast asleep, avoids me at every given opportunity. Oh my God, what have I done? I can't blame her for any of this. I couldn't imagine anything worse than being married to me. I'm a miserable old sod at times, so quick to forget anniversaries and birthdays. One year when my wife loved the pyjamas I brought her, I subsequently brought her exactly the same pair of pyjamas for her the following 3 Christmases in a row after that. Truly, I thought I was being incredibly clever, getting her something she really loved. But to my amazement, she no longer seemed enthusiastic about my gifts. I had been visibly disappointed when she opened her present. I'd asked her why her face was wearing a hang-dog glum expression. She was sitting with her open present on her lap. Then all of a sudden she flung the pyjamas at me in anger, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's what I think of your goddamn present!" she sprouted furiously. I remember thinking that my wife must be going through the change of life. My friend Bert had warned me about that. His wife had recently become quite volatile when she reached the menopause. Unpredictable, he had said, flying off the handle at anything he said, rather like a snapping turtle. "What's wrong?" I said. "Are you going through the change of life?" My words seemed to add fuel to the fire. My wife was furious. "How dare you? No, Weston, I'm not bloody menopausal if that's what you're saying. But I soon will be if you buy me another pair of these bloody pyjamas. You've brought me exactly the same pair of pyjamas for the last 3 Christmases in a row." "But you said you liked them the first time I bought them for you," I say incredulously. "I remember you were quite thrilled. You said they were your best Christmas present ever." "And I did like them the first Christmas you bought them for me. But I don't want the same present year after year. It makes me feel like you haven't thought about me at all. How would you like it, Weston, if I served you scrambled eggs for breakfast day after day, year after year, and you asked me why the breakfast is always the same? Why can't we have blueberry pancakes for a change, you ask me? What do I say to you? You told me that my scrambled eggs were the best ever. Wouldn't you say, 'Yes, sweetheart, but I'd rather like a change'?" It was suddenly that a sententious light switched on in my head. I perceived exactly what my wife was trying to say. She wanted me to think of her, to buy her something special, unique, exclusive, with an attentive thoughtfulness behind the purchase. And as usual, I'd failed abysmally. I excelled in one thing, getting everything horribly wrong all the time. It was a Saturday morning. I was feeling as flat as an open bottle of champagne that has lost its sparkle and effervescence, as empty as a finished box of chocolates, as lost as a helpless kitten, abandoned by its mother, stranded on the side of the road. There is nothing worse in the entire world than seeing what you discerned as your life, and a good one at that, being squandered and flushed down the toilet pan, and there is little you can do about it. One thing I know about my wife is once she's made an impassive decision, she will stick to it with an audacious determination that cannot be shifted, and there will be no changing her mind. Granted, she's been long-suffering, acquiescent, longanimous and selfless in our relationship for long enough, putting up with my assertive demands, long working hours, and sometimes cranky, disgruntled behaviour. I do have a problem with moodiness, and my wife over the years has learnt to evade me when I become like a rattlesnake, rather unapproachable. To be fair, I never screamed or shouted, but I wasn't exactly that pleasing to be around, especially if there's been issues in the office, which I've been guilty of bringing back home with me from time to time. I think she's come to the place of no return. I can smell the end of our relationship brewing in the wind as powerfully and poignantly as the rain in the air. I just knew that it was over between us. You get a sense about these things. I was filled with remorseful regret, obviously. I should have done things differently. Our only child, Georgina, Georgie for short, is living in university digs now, and although she would be sad, disappointed and aggrieved if me and Alison get divorced, it really will be no skin off her nose. She's independent now, fully engaged in her brand new life. She was already a bird that had fled the nest, so thankfully we wouldn't have custody issues with her. But even so, the recriminating sadness I feel about the finality of our relationship is all-consuming. Now in hindsight, I wish I'd been more thoughtful and generous, not so determined to gratify my own ego by always getting my way. I dial my wife's cell phone number. To my surprise, my wife actually answers. "Hello, Weston," comes her curt, indifferent voice. "What do you want?" "I'd like to come home, sweetheart. I'm really sorry for being so—" "Being so what?" asks my wife. "Being so obnoxious, cantankerous, disagreeable, always insistent that I'm right." My wife sounds rather bewildered. "That's a first. You're actually apologising for insisting you're right. What is this, April Fool's Day or something?" Please don't be like that, Alison. Please, I beg you. Give me one more chance. We need to talk. I love you, you know. I don't want us to throw our relationship away. You know us. We can get through anything. We always have and we always shall. No, Weston, I've had enough. I'm tired of forgiving you over and over again. I'm sick of you laying down the law. I'm frustrated that you're never home, and when you are, you're always so moody. It's like the house is all lovely and peaceful, and then you suddenly come home, and it feels like a black storm cloud is looming over me. You're always forgetting important dates that are so important to me, like anniversaries and birthdays, as if they mean absolutely nothing to you. That hurts and offends me, you know. You always put yourself first in every endeavour, sparing so little regard for me. You're self-centred, selfish, way too demanding. I've had about as much of you as I can possibly take. It's over between us, Weston. You can come and get your stuff when I'm out, but I will be sending you the divorce papers. I'm sorry that it's come to this, but I've reached the end of my tether. I really have. Don't even try to change my mind, because I'm not going to budge on my decision. So that's it then, Alison. You're being exceedingly unreasonable. We need to talk about this. You can't just end our relationship like this after everything we've been through together. Look, Weston, I've been unhappy for many years with you. I'll be damned if I'm going to spend the rest of my life feeling so miserable. This is no way to live. Now that Georgie has left home, we don't have to pretend to be the happily married couple anymore. It really is for the best if we both part company. My heart is in my throat. My fingers are trembling. My hands have become clammy and moist. I don't want to hear my wife prattle on about why she wants to leave me. I know every disparaging word she's uttering about me is absolutely true. But every time I hear about my shortcomings and failings as a husband, I feel as if I've been pierced in the gut or stabbed with the spear of a stingray. I can feel myself fighting back tears. But I'll be damned if I'm going to cry. My mother always taught me that men should never ever cry, but should keep a stoic, stiff upper lip at all times. I can hear her words in my head from when I was a little boy. Weston, now don't you cry. You're a big boy now. It's not becoming for a boy to cry. I decide I quickly need to run across town to buy a few things. I require an immediate distraction post-haste. Anything to make me not think about my wife. Never before have I wished it wasn't the weekend, but right now I would give anything to be back at work, surrounded by a plethora of problems and issues that need addressing, and offer me that quintessential convenient diversion or escapism that I'm yearning for. I just don't want to think. It hurts too much. I don't want to meditate on what I could have done differently, or on all my failings as a husband. What's the point in that? If my mother was alive, she'd say, Weston, don't cry over spilt milk. What's done is done. Just move forward. Take one step after another. It's easier said than done, Mother, I say begrudgingly under my breath. I stare at the vacant emptiness of my beige existence. In this mediocre, gloomy, wishy-washy, bland, cheerless, poky motel room that is so dauntingly depressing. Even looking at it makes me feel intrinsically lugubrious and saturnine as I open and close my motel room door. The man in occupancy of the motel room directly next to mine is also locking up his door. For a moment our eyes briefly meet as he nods at me. I am struck with the extraordinary revelation that this man has an amazingly familiar face. Where do I know him from, I think? It begins to bug me, even when I make my way back to my black SUV. I climb into the driver's seat, driving steadily towards town with my radio blaring, with Engelbert Humbleding's song, All the Girls I've Loved Before. I'm trying to rack my brains as to where I know this man from, but I just can't find the name to fit the face. I can't help wondering if he also experienced a similar recognition when he saw me, but I can't be sure about that. It's when I'm in the grocery store that I bump into the man again. How extraordinary, I think. It's like serendipitously our paths are somehow meant to cross. God only knows why. Hello, he says suddenly. It's Weston Finley. Am I right? I nod. I knew I recognised you, he said. We were at school together, in the very same class. I'm Ted Young. I'm not sure if you actually remember me. You were always the popular one at school. I would be the shrinking violet in the background, getting personally acquainted with the white concrete walls, he jokes. I laugh. In a trice, a light switches on in my head. Oh, my word, I do remember you. It's good to see you. How you doing? Not very well, as it happens, he says, seemingly surprised at himself for blurting out what was possibly a clandestine secret. If you must know, the wife's kicked me out. She's asking me for a divorce. If Ted had not been so forthright with me, I would possibly have lied about why I was also staying in a motel in the first place. I don't really want to rub salt in the wound, to admit my shortcomings and inadequacies as a husband, but with Ted's direct honesty, I found myself being upfront with him, which surprises even me. I'm in exactly the same boat, I'm afraid. Bloody miserable business, this divorce malarkey, is it not? My wife asked me for a divorce, about 20 minutes ago, actually. But I knew it was coming. I could smell it on the wind. You get a sense about these things, you know. I came shopping to help myself harness my thoughts in another direction, over practical issues. I'd so much rather be thinking of shaving foam right now than my wife. Distraction is the best tool in the business, I find. Ted nods, as if he comprehends exactly what I'm saying, as if he too came out shopping to redirect the focus of his mind. Do you fancy a coffee? He asks. I could almost certainly do with the company. In truth, I don't know how I'm going to get through a Saturday away from home. It's tough, you know. Those motel rooms, ghastly. Let's just say they're tenebrously sombre,
So miserably funereal. I mean, those dingy, oppressive furnishings, and the bed. It's just so bloody morbid, is it not? I couldn't have put it better myself, I say. Certainly if I ran a motel business, I think I'd inject a lot more style and colour into the rooms, for God's sake. It can't be that hard, surely.
It was so good having coffee with Ted. I felt relieved not to be the only man in the world having a screwed-up relationship.
Do you remember Hattie Gretchener? He asks me. She was in the year below us at school. Yes, I remember her. You probably don't know this, but me and Hattie, we had a thing. We were an item for a while when we were in our teens, for 5 years or so. She was my first love, you know. Oh, yes, it was you. I remember now, says Ted reflectively. She used to talk about you an awful lot. Now I come to think about it, she had quite a thing for you. Believe it or not, I married her. You married Hattie Gretchener?
I look at Ted with a bemused expression on my face. I remember Ted had been so quiet and unassuming at school, shrinking into the shadows. He didn't want to get noticed. He had married my first love, who was so sparkling, effervescent and flamboyant. It was hard for me to fathom Ted and Hattie getting together. It seemed like an incongruous match to me. Even after all these years, I'd thought about Hattie quite often, wondered what she'd done with her life. But marrying Ted, such an unlikely character, had come as a bolt out of the blue for me. He laughs, rubbing his chin gingerly. More's the pity me, he says. You know, the funny thing is, I never liked Hattie at school. I wasn't remotely attracted to her. She was never my type. I think she was far too, let's just say, sparkly for me. I had the hots for what's her name? Alison Mayer, that's right. You remember her? Well, I never had the guts to ask her out. I always regretted that, you know. We would eye each other across the classroom during lessons. I would smile at her. She'd smile shyly back at me. I know she liked me, but I didn't have the balls to ask her out. I've always been so damn shy and self-effacing. It's always been a huge hindrance in my life. But back then, I had no confidence or self-esteem. Well, you're not going to believe this. I married Alison, your crush. But not for much longer by the looks of things. This time it's Ted's turn to look incredulous. You married Alison Mayer? I can hardly believe it. That's almost impossible to comprehend. We both married each other's crushes. He looks bewildered. But I don't understand. If you don't mind my saying so, but you're so not her type. Isn't she far too gentle and delicate for you? It's rather like a confident, cocky lion, if you forgive me for saying so, marrying a demure doe. I could say the same for you and Hattie. Hattie was so effusive, buoyant, bubbly, gregarious, socially inclined, very popular. What went wrong in your marriage? I ask, taking a sip of my cappuccino, wiping the white foam that has gathered above my lips. You mean what did not go wrong? Said Ted, looking sad and reflective. I just couldn't make Hattie happy. You know, she really was so extrovert and ebullient. I think she found my reticent reserve very annoying. She kept telling me to come out of my shell, to stop being so introverted, so self-contained. But that is who I am. I've never been gregarious like her, as you so quick to point out. He pauses for a moment. It's funny, he says, looking at me. You would have been a much better fit for Hattie. She would like the fact that you wear your heart on your sleeve, and are so comfortably extrovert and confident. Everything I'm not, and never have been. In truth, now you come to mention it, I think Alison would have been a better fit for you too, I admit. I do like your lion analogy. You're spot on about that. She would have liked it if I had been quieter, more sensitive, understanding, thoughtful. I think she found me a bit like a bull in a delicate china shop, breaking everything in sight, being tactless, insensitive, dominant, assertively aggressive. She complained tirelessly about my thoughtlessness over and over again. My inability to remember birthdays and special occasions would drive her potty. It rarely offended her, you know.
"That's where I'm very good," said Ted. "I never forget a special occasion. I'm very particular about that. I buy my wife every kind of exclusive gift you can think of. Not that she notices, of course, but there you go. It sounds like we both married the wrong woman, I say. Alison would appreciate it if I was thoughtful about her gifts. I gave her the same present 3 years in a row. She was exceedingly upset about that."
Ted looks appalled.
"You did what? That's terrible, bro. How could you? I mean, she must have thought you didn't give a toss about her." "But that's where you're wrong, I say. I did give a toss. That's why I gave her the same present. She was thrilled and delighted with it the first time I bought it for her. You don't get it, bro, do you? No one wants the same present on repeat."
That night, as I lay in my uncomfortable stiff bed, in this Plutonian, forlorn, desolate room, where the light of my bedside lamp illuminates the rough concrete of the grey, dingy walls, I become impatiently restless, glancing at the clock. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I can't get a damn wink of sleep. What the hell is wrong with me? I'm tossing and turning in my bed. I'm sweating like a pig. It's not even hot out there. Anyone would think I was a woman in the change of life, with all these hot flushes that I'm experiencing. I'm tormented by the images of all the things I've done wrong. I want nothing more in the world than to return home to the peace and tranquility, to the illustrious tree-lined Seattle neighbourhood where I live, or should I say, more appropriately, lived. I don't think I can stand reviewing in my mind the things that went so horribly wrong in my marriage. It's like a bloody video recorder that won't shut the F up. Excuse the foul language I'm using, but sometimes it's those indignant foul words that can only appropriately express the true level of my gargantuan exasperation and despair that I'm feeling. In truth, I feel like a dog being dragged back to my vomit by its owner again and again, being constantly reminded of my shame. Why can I not let go of those nauseating thoughts? Why can't I just accept everything that has transpired between me and Alison as part of a chapter in my life, and turn to the next chapter and begin at a brand new page, move on with my life, without recruiting self-recrimination and regret to the equation, to make myself feel 1,000 times worse? I reluctantly climb out of my bed, wiping away the sweat droplets that have gathered on my forehead. I fumble unsteadily towards the bottle of scotch. I better not get addicted to this stuff, I tell myself. But one stiff drink won't hurt. It might just anaesthetise the pain I'm feeling, help me get some much-needed sleep in that lumpy, hideously uncomfortable bed that is so quick to remind me of what I'm missing out on. I toss back a shot of the drink. It burns the back of my throat. I can hear some clamouring going on in the motel room next to mine. I realise that Ted is ambling around next door. He's obviously also struggling to get a wink of sleep. I knock on his door. Ted opens it. I can see his eyes are covered with red rims. I realise he must have been crying. I feel secretly jealous that he can have a physical release from his emotions through tears. I secretly would love to be able to cry. "Come in," he says, sniffing, opening the door for me. You must excuse me. I'm just having a weak moment." "I heard you clattering around in here. I guessed you were up. I thought you could do with a friend. I know I certainly could. I feel rather lonesome back in that beiger-than-beige, dreadful room, wallowing in self-pity and regret. I'm afraid I'm wishing I could go back in time to change things, but it's too bloody late for all that." To my astonishment, Ted bursts into tears. My life is a complete screw-up," he confesses. "I really messed up my marriage with Hattie. If only I could have been what she wanted me to be. If only I could have been more extrovert, less reserved. Then Hattie, she'd never have asked me for a divorce. She tells me I'm just too bloody quiet, too dull and boring, and she wants more colour in her life, and I guess I'm just not that. Look, as far as I'm concerned, we both screwed up. We both did. It's not nice to have to admit to ourselves, but we have to face it. We have to live with our mistakes, move forward, get on with our lives. You cannot be something you're not, Ted. Don't apologise for who you are. You've always been reserved,
Hattie knew that about you when she married you. She knew what she was getting into. So she's responsible for the breakdown of your marriage as well, if you don't mind my saying so. You make a good point there. I think she thought she could change me, bring me out of myself. But I've always been like a crab in my shell, somewhat reluctant to come out. Exactly. You can't be something you're not. Women can be like that, you know. They think they can change us, but we're pretty much set in our ways. We're not to be changed, and why should we be? Why should we apologise for who we are? We are what we are, and that is it. I'm glad you came around, says Ted. I thought I'd never get to sleep. I am grateful for the company. I'm already feeling better now you're here. I tell you what, I've got a crazy idea that might just work. I don't know about you, but I can't stand these motel rooms a moment longer. How about we go for a drive in the countryside? I've got a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc in my refrigerator. It's ice cold. I've got head torches and a fabulously cosy picnic blanket. I know this fabulous wood grove. It's about 45 minutes drive away from here. I used to walk there a lot as a kid with my parents. It's really lovely in there. We could sit in the fresh air, drink wine under the night sky and talk. I can make a fire for us. We can roast marshmallows. I've got chocolate, graham crackers, marshmallows in my grocery bag. I always buy them when I'm out of sorts or feel very sorry for myself. Oh, my word, that sounds jolly good. Now you're talking, said Ted, looking enthusiastic. I'd love nothing better to get out of my crappy, comfortless incarceration. I simply hate this motel room. And the bed in this place feels so morbid. It's like we're lying on our own graves. You're right about that, I say. Shall we get going? Ted climbs into the truck, in the seat next to me, sinking back happily into the leather seats. I feel so happy to be in his company. It's good to be with another person who's going through exactly the same emotional turmoil as I am. I guess the saying misery loves company really does apply here. Ted and I never were close at school. We were so different in every regard. I was big into sports, the captain of the basketball team back then, very good in field and trek, popular with the girls, of course, while Ted was quiet, unassuming, very reticent, although as bright as a button, I might add, exceedingly clever. He was considered the best chess player in school, winning all the championships against competitive schools. My very best friend, Cooper, was the last person I wanted to talk to right now, whom I could have confided in about the bedraggled state of my life. We lived down the road from each other. We had become acquainted at college, yet I'd never dream of confiding in the likes of him about my upcoming divorce. How could he possibly comprehend what I was going through, as his life was so damn perfect? It was one of the things I found so incredibly annoying about him. He and his wife were so madly in love after 21 years of marriage. Oh, and his children were getting successful grades at school, of which he was so quick to point out to me. It was always Madison this, Madison that, Madison the next thing. Do you know the teachers at Madison School say she's the finest art student that they've ever seen? And as for Scott, he's so perfect. He received a scholarship. The teachers are in awe of him. All right, I get it that parents are proud of their kids, but I find it more than a little grating when they go on and boast about their children. Don't they realise how nauseating it is? It leaves a bitter, nasty taste in my mouth. It's almost like Cooper is bragging about his own progeny, his high-quality sperm, of which mine is clearly so much more inferior. To make matters worse, his business is booming. Everything he touches appears to turn to gold. It's an awful pity the chocolate he eats doesn't turn to gold, because it might just glue his mouth shut for a change. Of course, he's financially prosperous and wants for nothing. I knew if I was in his company he would be quite condescending. I can see him there now, taking a puff of his cigar, blowing out a long trail of smoke. Well, Weston, you really have screwed up, bro, this time, have you not? You should have been more attentive with your marriage. You should have initiated date nights. Now me and Cheryl, we this, we that, we the next thing. We're so bloody wonderful, so incredibly perfect. I can just see it now. You know what it makes me want to do? Ram my finger right down my throat and throw up violently. Another thing is, I don't buy it. Do you? I don't care who you are. Everybody has problems. No one is perfect, no matter what they say. I gather a duffel bag, in which I place the picnic blanket, a fire starter and matches, a couple of glasses, some cashew nuts, chips, marshmallows, chocolate, graham crackers, a wedge of camembert cheese, some grapes, olives, French baguette that I brought earlier on in the day. Luckily I left the brie out. It's soft and melty, delicious. It's like we're going to have a midnight feast tonight. The idea has uplifted me considerably. It makes me reminisce over camping holidays I had during my youth when I was a young boy. Those are happy memories. Ted climbs into the seat, places the safety belt over his chest, clicking it into its slot, while I start up the engine, pressing down the accelerator firmly, and boom, we're driving down the windy asphalt roads, my smooth tyres gliding seamlessly, my engine purring contentedly, as we journey past meadows, fields, barns, farmhouses, and so much more. None of it which we can visibly see, as everything is obscure and faint, shrouded by a mantle of the twilight that blankets everything in a veil of darkness, from which the twinkling stars glitter through the heavens like bright rhinestone jewels, and the ivory moon casts her ethereal shadows over the landscape. "I'm glad we're doing this," he says. "I'm already feeling so much more upbeat." I put on Radio Classic King, 98.1 FM, Seattle radio. We listen to the soft music as my car glides smoothly down the asphalt country roads towards an area where street lights have abandoned the countryside, and the only lights left on the roads are from my headlights, the moon and the stars. The night is blanketed in a velvety blackness, while the silhouettes of the towering ponderosa pines and Douglas fir trees seem like dark, dense outlines on the landscape. "Here we are," I say, driving to the side of the road, in a very narrow clearing where I park. "This is it," says Ted, looking at the tall trees. "It does look rather remote." I grin. "Isn't that the idea, bro? Escapism, I say. Isn't that what we're both searching for?" "Could there be any predators in there?" asks Ted nervously. "A mountain lion, perhaps? I mean, you do hear stories, don't you?" "I come prepared," I grin. "I have my rifle in the trunk, but our fire will ward off any predators. I assure you of that." "Of course," sighs Ted gratefully. "What was I thinking?" We climb out of my truck, slamming the car doors behind us gently. We amble cautiously through the woods, guided by the light of our headlamps. We can hear the crickets chirping, the frogs croaking, and if we crane our heads up to the sky, we see a plethora of silvery stars, along with the full moon, that seems to smile down upon us with a warm, welcoming embrace. How I wish my wife could be as congenial as she. We eagerly trudge down the dark earthen paths of the woodgrove, our spirits uplifted, our enthusiasm stoked up like the embers of a dying fire that has been revived. I feel excited, exhilarated, peaceful in this blissful, tranquil sanctuary. The soft wind kisses our cheeks, while the towering slender shapes of the trees pencil up into the sky like giants adorned in bushy resplendence that appear to jiggle in the wind, almost as if they're waving at us with hundreds of hands. I've seen the occasional yellow eyes staring at us through the undergrowth, heard rustling and quick scampering of feet scurrying away. I think we've scared off a couple of deer and a raccoon. Neither of the species that pleased to make our acquaintance, I'm afraid. The moon is peppering a soft gossamer twinkling light through the open canopy. The wind remains cool and exhilarating. The forest smells buttery, sweet, woody, very fresh. Our boots crunch a confetti of forest debris beneath our heels, which snap and crunch as we walk up the precipitous mountain trail, until we find a smooth clearing, which is a little like a small room strewn with a plethora of rocks and pebbles, surrounded by trees. I roll out the blanket on the dark earthen floor, and then me and Ted search for some wood. We layer it carefully with a little kindling, and it catches. Before long we have a crackling fire going, while we sit around it contentedly, staring into the bright orange flames, smelling the wood smoke as it burns brightly. The orange flames flicker against a tenebrous landscape. I open the wine and pour us each a glass. We both watch the fire crackling, rolling, folding, sparking and spitting. There's nothing more therapeutic. I feel as if we should be telling each other ghost stories. We begin to enjoy our glasses of wine, clinking glasses together, eating cheese and baguette. And then I roast Ted a marshmallow, which I squash into a chocolate between a sandwich of graham crackers, and the chocolate melts under the steaming heat of the marshmallows. Ted takes a bite. He looks at me with appreciation. "Now that tastes remarkably good," he says. "I'm so glad we came out here tonight. It reminds me that there is life beyond the gloomy motel room, and, of course, a crumbling marriage, and that despite everything, there is hope. Cheers to that, to new beginnings, I say," as we clink glasses together. As Ted and I roast marshmallows and talk, all of a sudden I get the overwhelming sense we're not alone. It's a feeling that nudges me, almost as precisely as the cool breeze does. I also notice that the forest has become quieter, as if for a brief moment the orchestra of the frogs and crickets have taken a respite. I don't feel afraid nor concerned. It's possibly a fox, I reassure myself, but that is when my eyes perceive this eye-shine, from about 8 feet up. I'm almost certain I see a black, humanoid figure peeking at us from behind the tree. We're being watched. Someone is spying on us. I'm 100% certain they're human. "Hello," I say. "Who is there? We've seen you now. Why don't you show yourself? Give yourself up. If you like, you can come and join us for a glass of wine and a snack." Ted and I are staring at the tree. That is when we see her. She's female. She walks towards us. At first she seems shy and reticent. Then she gets bolder. But what the heck is she? In the full light of my torch, along with the dancing shadows of the moonlight, I realise she's a Bigfoot. I am gobsmacked. I look at her in bewilderment. I'm certain my eyes must have grown to the size of teacups. My jaw has dropped wide open. What the heck? I'm thinking. I've heard stories in the past about Bigfoot. I hasten to admit that I've actually sniggered at the very idea that a creature like this could exist in North America. But there is no doubt in my mind at all, that this Bigfoot is indeed real. What the heck, I'm thinking again. I quickly rub my eyes to make absolutely certain I'm not hallucinating. I glance over towards Ted. His eyes look as bewildered as mine are. He's completely dumbfounded by what he's perceiving. As I think these thoughts, the idiosyncratic creature seems to be smiling at me through her deep-set treacle-coloured eyes that I could swear look amused by my thoughts, as if she's perceiving exactly what I'm thinking. I'm struck by how remarkably human she is. I've heard that Bigfoots are supposed to look like apes. I'm sorry, but I categorically have to disagree with that assumption. The only thing about this creature that may have earned them a likeness to an ape is the pointed tip of her head, and of course her overlong arms. Other than that, this creature is alarmingly human in every single regard. She's covered in long flowing hair, very dark in colour. I promise you she's got a really pretty face, which is perfectly symmetrical, easy on the eye, but her body is powerfully strong, dense with muscle definition and tone. I bet underneath that silky black hair of hers, that is darker than the night, she possibly has a six-pack. Her breasts are small and pert. They stick out like two little hills through her soft hair. The creature is studying us curiously, but she's not unfriendly at all. I know she's wearing a magnificent necklace of eagle's feathers around her neck. I'm not sure what they're supposed to represent. She surprises the both of us by sitting right down next to me on her haunches. Perhaps when I called out to her, thinking she was a human, and asking her to join us for a snack, she took us at our word. She sees my marshmallows gathered on my skewer that are all soft and mushy. She opens her hands as if to say, "Can I have one of those?" I quickly get to work to make the creature a graham cracker with chocolate and marshmallow, which here in America we call s'mores. The creature watches me. My hands are trembling with excitement. I'm making a bloody s'more for a Bigfoot. I can hardly believe this. The creature is sitting so close to me, I could literally reach out and touch her. I could stroke her gloriously smooth dark hair. I really do comprehend why people are intimidated by these creatures.
I guess she must be easily 8 foot tall, 700 pounds or more, but there is no fear gathered in my heart, no trepidation or uncertainty, for this creature exudes a generous warmth, an outer-worldly intelligence, a perceptive intuition. Even though I don't know this for certain, I sense she knows all about me. And why I feel this, I can't actually fathom. The creature takes a bite of the s'more. I realise that both Ted and I are holding our breaths as we watch her bite into the s'more. We rarely want her to like it, and we are not disappointed. The creature reacts to the s'more, as how I would only dream my wife would react over one of my Christmas presents. Her dark eyes twinkle. She audibly makes an appreciative groan that comes from the back of her throat. It sounds orgasmic. She reaches out her hands again and again, and dozens of s'mores later, she seems very satisfied. She rubs her stomach appreciatively. I don't want this Bigfoot to leave us. I really don't. I love her congenial energy, her warm, generous presence. She makes me feel like I'm bathed in unconditional love and acceptance. I find that I'm eagerly giving the creature bread dipped in brie, or my cashew nuts and grapes. She finishes every single morsel, while we watch her in awe, as if she's an angel sent from heaven, that we just don't want to leave us. She sits there for a while next to us, studies us both through her warm eyes. She then gets up and nods to us. She pulls out a couple of eagle's feathers from her necklace, placing an eagle's feather into each of our hands. She turns around and glides away, and we watch her moving as she swings her arms backwards and forwards, turning her head over her shoulders to regard us one more time, and then she's gone. We still bask in the glory of her energy. Her warm presence remains with us. We're like two cats grabbing the only sunshine left on a cold winter's day. Neither Ted or I say a single word, for to break the silence would be to end the magic of this mysterious moment that I want to last forever and ever. I don't want to let go of it. I've never felt this light before. We stay on our picnic blanket, watching the sun rise through the canopy of the trees, as if an invisible paint has brushed the sky in splashes of gold, tangerine, orange, pink and purple. It's magnificent to behold. I hold my breath, breathing in the beauty of this magical moment, clinging on to it with all my might, not wanting to abandon this poignant, indelible memory. The pretty bird song filters through the forest. Finally we gather our things together, but we don't utter a word. We even drive back to the motel in silence, not even disturbing the quiet with classical music. It's only when we both drive into the parking bay at the car lot at the motel that we both say, "Bloody hell! We saw a Bigfoot! Can you believe it?" I know it might sound strange, but after that incredulous night, everything changed for both Ted and I, whom are now the very best of friends. The heaviness just lifted off our lives, as if by magic. And if that's not crazy and nonsensical enough, both Ted and I are now married to each other's ex-wives. We're incredibly happy. We often hang out together, the four of us, as if that was how it was always meant to be. Ted and I still hold on to our eagle feathers. We will never forget how our lives were transformed after we encountered that Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.